Hi everyone, how's it going? This is Eden of Light Cycle Astrology. Hope you guys are doing terrific out there. Today I'm doing Mantic Monday episode 51, and we're going to be taking a look at a Pisces lunar eclipse that is happening this week in the middle of the week, and doing horoscopes for all 12 rising signs to place this eclipse in a particular house based on your rising sign. Now, this is a really important eclipse to begin to notice because over the next 2 years, we're actually going to be having 2 more eclipses after this one in the same sign. More than that, this series of 3 eclipses happening in the sign of Pisces are all going to be North Node lunar eclipses, which is really kind of unique because normally what happens is as eclipse season rolls around twice a year and we get eclipses happening in 2 opposite signs, for the course of like a year and a half to 2 years, normally we'll get a combination of both lunar eclipses in a sign and solar eclipses. But as I researched this eclipse today, I discovered that there are only going to be lunar eclipses in Pisces over the next 2 years. No solar eclipses will happen. Why that's important is because in astrology, lunar eclipses have a very different meaning from solar eclipses. And in a way, solar eclipses and lunar eclipses sort of work together to close doors and open doors, or open doors and close doors. But we're going to explore this Pisces eclipse today because all 3 eclipses that are happening over the next 2 years in this sign are very specific. They are North Node conjoined and they are only lunar. So those 2 things carry very specific interpretations to them. So it's important for us to take a look at what particular house this is falling in, because that'll give us some indicators as to the life domain that the eclipse may be representing big dynamic changes in. So we're going to do that today. Now, if you're new to the channel, please like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any videos. That always helps the channel to grow. You can always leave comments if you want to share your reflections or anything that you noticed about the astrology. That's a really good learning experience for me. Helps me to be a better astrologer for you guys here on the channel. And also it opens up a sense of community for people that love astrology and are deeply interested in it like I am myself. If you want to inquire about readings from me personally, you can go to Light Cycle Astrology, my website, where I offer my reading services there, and you can get more personal help if you're interested in that. Okay, well, let's pull up the real-time clock, and there are a few more things that I want to share with you before we get into the horoscopes that will help us understand the meaning behind these eclipses. So one thing that's really important is whenever it comes to interpreting eclipses in astrology, you do want to figure out if this eclipse is going to be visible over the birth location. So that's one thing that you can do to see how intense or impactful is an eclipse likely to be, or likely to maybe not be, depending on, is this eclipse actually visible from the position of the birth location. Now, I use dateandtime/eclipses.com to sort of see the eclipse, and there's all kinds of websites out there, but this eclipse is going to be visible over the whole of Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and all 3 Americas, right? North, Central, and South America. So if you were born in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, or any of the Americas, this eclipse is going to be visible over your birth chart location. And it's also, it's a partial lunar eclipse, so it's not the most intense lunar eclipse possible, but having that visible over your birth chart location is something that is important to consider in terms of weighing out the intensity of an eclipse. Now, this eclipse is coming through specifically GMT time. It's going to begin around 1:41 a.m. on Wednesday the 17th, and it's going to be peaking at about 3:44 a.m. and then it'll be phasing out by 5:47 a.m. Again, that's GMT time, so you just convert that from there. But in any case, the other thing that is also important to bring up is that, like we were saying, this eclipse is a series of 3 eclipses that are happening over the next 2 years. All 3 eclipses are going to be North Node. So you see, there's the moon And you'll see the North Node is actually in the sign of Aries, but it's close enough. It's within about 18 degrees of the full moon. So as the full moon comes through over the next couple of hours in Pisces, even though the node itself is not in Pisces, it creates that eclipse connection because it's crossing over the ecliptical path exactly. And that is what an eclipse is, right? So but over the next 2 years, as full moons come through Pisces, we get two more of these eclipses. So, what do eclipses mean if they're lunar eclipses? First, let's sort of get a broad stroke kind of interpretation of that, so you understand maybe the narrative or the theme that goes along with lunar eclipses in particular. So, lunar eclipses tend to represent circumstances around us closing a door. What does that mean? It's maybe not something that you have a lot of control over. It's something that is fated or a kind of outside of your control, a fortune or a fate that sort of comes along, or that or like through no action of your own, there's a door that is closing. Now, that can sound scary as we get into the language of, okay, this eclipse is happening in this place, in this house, and there's a door closing, and you're like, well, I don't want a door closing in that part of my life. But lunar eclipses can also, or simultaneously, bring about a culmination of matters, which is kind of a different and less scary idea, right? It's that maybe we've been working towards something over a long period of time, and we finally gotten there or sort of reached the mountaintop, and so it culminates. And so it's not as scary to think of, I've reached the pinnacle, I don't need to keep doing this anymore. So but there's a way in which with lunar eclipses, the fates or the fortunes or circumstances around us tend to sort of act for us in sort of saying, okay, you don't need to do this anymore. So that is the broad interpretation of what eclipses tend to represent or symbolize. Now, they can also, of course, relate to lunar things, right? Because this is a lunar eclipse. So the eclipsing of lunar light can suggest that there may be difficulties with the health of the body or the vitality of a motherly figure, or trouble in the home or family or something like that, because the eclipsing light of the moon is happening. And so we get sometimes difficulty around lunar kinds of symbolic things like mothers, homes, families, body, health, stuff like that, right? But let's also pull in here the symbolism of the North Node, because this is a North Node lunar eclipse. Now, it's North Node symbolism almost goes against the grain of lunar eclipse symbolism in a certain way, but essentially, North Node symbolism is a lot like our um, us taking decisive and poignant action to be involved in a worldly pursuit or desire. I get the image of like an astronaut being strapped into, the launch chair, and they do the countdown, and then they hit the blasters, and the astronaut is sort of blasting off to go explore space. You get this symbolic imagery of North Node hunger, or a striving, or like a willing, and it's very connected to what we can do in the world. It's very, in the world, I'm doing this, or I'm seeking this, or striving for that. And so like the astronaut that is willing to explore, uh, not the world literally, but the cosmos in a tangible worldly way, which is very different than South Node symbolism, which tends to be a little bit more like the tide sort of pulling you back into oneness, and maybe like a surrendering or a letting go of, or like a dissolution, or like a dissolving into like a union with God or something like that. So it can be connected to spiritual pursuits, or those types of things, but it can also be like a detachment towards worldly things. So there's a couple of images you can have. You can have sort of like North Node. Are you in a river swimming up the current like they did in the Olympics this year in Paris, where all uh, the athletes were swimming against that current because they were striving to get somewhere in life, right? They wanted to be the best. They wanted to be champions. Or like South Node, maybe you just give up and you're like, I don't really need the victory. I'm just gonna let the fate of the cosmos sort of just wash me along with it downstream, and I'm just gonna merge with, divine union or something like that. Very different feels for the North and South Node. So again, we have when you combine both of these things, we have the potential for things to be kind of closing down or coming to a culmination of some kind. But we're also striving to get somewhere in that direction, which is really fascinating. So the general theme that I came up with is the eclipse theme for this particular eclipse, and of course the next two that are coming along, is something like chasing union in the world that will meet circumstantially with like an ending or a culmination. So that's our theme that we're working with. Now, of course, there can be very specific and completely other kinds of interpretations that you can make with this combination of eclipse energy, but that's the one that sort of is speaking out to me personally that I'm going to apply to each of the rising signs. So hope that makes sense. And now let's go ahead and we're going to put Aries first in line here. Aries is on the ascendant. So if you are an Aries rising, I'm going to read off of my notes so I don't mess this up because I thought long and hard about all of these. Now, again, my job is going to be for you to hopefully take away enough symbolic imagery to see where the lines of impact as it pertains to these particular houses might be. For Aries rising, that's going to be in the 12th house where this eclipse is taking place. So um, it seems like almost trying to corner all of the ghosts related to maybe things like home or family or mothers into one place in order to sort of deal with them. So the 12th house, this place where there are things in the shadows or things secret to our own awareness, like sort of in our blind spot, or peoples that um, maybe are working against us consciously, unconsciously. It can be us working against ourselves consciously or unconsciously, but having this yearning or this north node sort of I'm willing myself into this domain. I'm intentionally seeking the 12th house kind of place to sort of get at all of the hidden dimensions of life that may be related to family or mothers, or even just union with some kind of idea about who you need to be holistically, like in terms of health or body or something like that could be coming up here. But I get this image of like um, in Aries rising, saying to themselves, I'm going to corner all of the ghosts that haunt me in one place, and I'm going to deal with them. That's sort of that north node, going headlong into battle in this particular house domain. But then what happens as this process unfolds is that an effort that brings about the circumstances or circumstances around you resolve these emotional, destructive, secret issues, right? These are the 12th house tends to be about things that are sort of destructive or unhealthy. This is Pisces, so it's like an emotional sign. And there's secrets here. So it's kind of like as you as you corner the ghosts, um, things transpire, maybe outside of your control, that sort of bring you face to face with the destructive, shadowy sides of things in your life that I guess we all have to face at some point in some time, right? And we have to face these, because if you never face them, then how can you ever be free of them? So it feels like, obviously this could have something to do with physical health. It could have like keywords of the 12th house could be like hospitals or confinement or solitude or things like a self sabotage and things like this. But on a deeper level, I feel like the soul is that north node is it's traveling towards the north node into this realm, and it's intentionally saying, I need to I need to face these shadows. and they are probably troublesome or destructive in some way, and they could be dealing with relationships with other people, family, home, whatever, right? But it feels as though that's sort of the astronaut launching into the cosmos. He's launching into the 12th house, and he's saying, all of you foes line up. I'm going to deal with you, kind of thing. Um, and that's commendable because, most often this is the place in the chart that will describe the places we shy away from. We don't want to look at, right? We just leave it alone. It's doing what it's doing in the shadows, and I'm doing what I'm doing out here, and I don't need to look at it because that's just going to bring trouble. But the 12th house being close to the first house, the house that is about being something whole and identified as yourself, the 12th house usually sends us into a realm of trying to be something more um, clearly defined as an identity, because it's trying to get back to the first house. So that's one thing that's really interesting. So hopefully that provides enough symbolism where you could sort of see where the shadowy areas that are destructive may be coming up. Maybe you're even forced to sort of deal with, or maybe you willingly deal with it, but that north node energy feels like the soul is like doing things to sort of get it to that place. Is what I feel for this particular eclipse in the 12th house if you're an Aries rising. Okay, let's go now to Taurus and put Taurus on the ascendant here. Okay, so if you're a Taurus rising, this eclipse is happening in the 11th house. So for me, it's like the soul yearns to belong to an ideal social membership of some kind, as it specifically pertains to the wishes, the hopes, the dreams for a particular future. So the North Node um, suggests that it's like I have this yearning. I want to bring the soul into some kind of redemption or union around the kind of social networks that I have. And there's like this ideal that I'm trying to get at, right? I'm trying to belong to the right group of people or the right um, ladder to climb up to success. And that has to do with the people around me, right? It's like that old saying, like, you are who you hang out with, or something like that, right? It's, and we tell our children, we're like, hey, be careful who you hang out with. This is, I feel like the soul's yearning or desire to sort of get at this social um, perfection of that has to do not just with the people, but with the goals or the dreams or the aspirations or the wishes. Um, that you want for your life in the world, right? It's a worldly kind of ideal, and we're all surrounded by people that fit that ideal or don't fit that ideal. So if you're a Taurus rising, it's like the soul is trying to get at who should I be around that is appropriate to the kinds of images that I see that eventually get me to where I'm trying to get to in terms of success or achievement. The soul is coalescing around the 10th house achievements that it sees, and the 11th house is saying, I'm going to bring you up to that place eventually. So that's really interesting. Now, because this is a lunar eclipse, and lunar eclipses tend to bring about things like the circumstances like shutting a door, or bringing about the culmination of something. It feels very much like, in order to get to that place that you see for yourself socially, or uh, getting to the place that you see and how that relates to the people you're around, it's like you run into a wall, like almost like a wall in the ocean. In Hawaii, we have these tidal wave walls when the waves crash into them to stop the tidal waves from advancing if they come. And it's like this image of like coming up to a wall and knocking on it, and it's not going to open. It's sort of locking you out. Now, I don't mean to say that that's locking you out of where you're the groups that you're trying to belong to, or the social ideal membership of people that you want to be among, but it's something like you get turned away, or there's a way in which you uh, leave behind, or maybe um, particular social dynamics leave you behind or leave you out. Now, that could be for the best because, again, the soul is trying to get at it. It feels like something different than what it has now, or more than what it has now. And so, in a way, it's sort of like you have to leave these particular networks behind, or these groups or friends or people behind in some way, or they can't go with you somehow. And there's like a culmination there. So it's always, of course, it's hard to lose people we've been around for a long time and we're friends with and all of that. But sometimes, we outgrow those things, and the soul feels like it's really trying to get somewhere, and it may need a different association of people to help it get there, or something like that. So that's what I would sort of suggest if you're a Taurus rising. Hopefully that gives enough imagery to sort of see how the social dynamics are sort of on the verge of dynamic change in your life if you're a Taurus rising. Okay, let's go ahead now and we'll place Gemini on the ascendant. If you're a Gemini rising, um, this eclipse is happening in your 10th house, a place that was associated with, of course, the world and the action that we take in the world. So very interesting because, of course, the North Node it carries the same symbolism as the 10th house does in many ways, right? The North Node is what kind of actions or desires how do we show up in the world? The 10th house has almost the exact same kind of connotations with it. So, um, but the soul yearns to enter or take on the world in some way. I'm trying not to limit this just to the keyword of like career or job or something like that, because the 10th house is always sort of narrowed down to like, oh, that's your career. And of course it is. But on a deeper level, the 10th house is really in some way how you show up and do something in the world. It doesn't have to be career. It can be anything, right? It can be like a yoga practice or something like that, or like anything that you're practicing and doing and intentionally showing up in the world as a thing that you do, is the 10th house. And it's like the soul is yearning to take on something in the world tangibly, but with the lunar eclipse suggesting a uh, kind of like experience that what you experience is like a completion or a culmination or doors shutting. So eventually, this may lead you into like a higher education or pilgrimage. I say that because once the Pisces eclipse 2-year period is over, the eclipses then the nodes then move into the ninth house if you're a Gemini rising, and so it's like I get this idea that you're showing up in the world, you have a desire to show up and take on the world in some way, but you just met with saying, "I'm done with what I've been doing," or something is finished, or circumstances are closing around me. Am I retiring? Am I resigning? Am I changing jobs? All of those things are, yeah, um, good examples of this, but um, I guess spiritually, it's as though it's a period at which you go through a transition of saying, whatever I'm doing in the world, um, it's a like a winding. It feels like a winding down moment that sort of leads to maybe a more reflective time after the 2-year eclipse period in Pisces that is going into the ninth house, that is like, well, I was doing this, but I need education because I really want to do that. Or I was doing this, but I need to get in touch with something higher and more meaningful. And maybe I need to go on some kind of spiritual pilgrimage or something like that. So it's not to say that you won't have a job and you're going to become a monk, but it's definitely feels like an experience where um, there's a real desire to show up in the world, but what it is that's happening now is sort of, it's coming to some kind of completion or culmination, and it feels as though there needs to be something next. So that's not necessarily a bad thing at all, right? It's just kind of a transition, I guess, if you look at it that way. So that is what I would sort of suggest as the eclipse for Gemini rising. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll place Cancer on the ascendant. And if you are a Cancer rising, this eclipse is falling in your ninth house, a place that was associated with astrology and divination, and it was called the place of God. Um, it was connected to things uh, like the institutions of law and religion and publishing, and of course, long distance travel and things like that, and anything divination. So that's an interesting place to have an eclipse. But I think all of those things, what are they representing? The ninth house is really just trying to get you to experience a sort of deeper or higher meaning in life, right? It's a very like existential, philosophical, higher value, higher meaning place. You sort of the North Node is saying, I need higher learning. I need higher experience. Um, I need more connection with God. I need to understand that, experience that, feel that, move into that, reflect in that space. That is what is happening with eclipses in the ninth place. So the soul yearns to gain more connection with something higher. I feel like that's that North Node that is saying, go this way. Um, Interesting because North Node is usually like enter the world. So is it enter higher educational university? Is it entering into something pertaining to the law or lawsuits? Is it the ninth house has it has worldly places and institutions associated with it, but all of those things sort of have this deeper meaning around the corner from them, right? So the place of God is where the soul is trying to get to in this particularly worldly avenue, but eventually this leads to you um, like finding a particular teaching device that is maybe about the end or the conclusion of things. So pursuing particular um, spiritual pursuits or pursuits in higher education or travel. With the uh, with the lunar eclipse, it suggests that the kinds of teaching devices that have been teaching you that you're still interested in developing a higher understanding. Those teaching devices have sort of, you've gotten as much learning or like juice out of them as you can squeeze on some level. So it's like it feels like you had a really um, amazing spiritual guide in the form of like a book, like a spiritual book, like like the Bible or like something like that. And it's like for a time that Bible gets closed or that spiritual text gets closed or maybe it even gets lost or something like that. And so there's kind of this imagery of needing to continue to expand spiritually or find more connection to something higher, but it can't be done with the same teaching devices that you've been around or using. There needs to be a new spiritual text that sort of comes in and gives you like a new way of learning about the higher meaning as it relates to the ninth house. So for me, that's really interesting. Now, of course, mundane examples, you could see something like just, okay, I've gone to college, I finished up a degree, that time is over, something like that. Or I've been a traveler, I've seen the world, now I'm ready to start a home life or something like that, right? So you could have these very tangible, real ways in which this is showing up. But even those tangible ways, they have that soul level of looking at them, saying, what's going on here? What is this representing? And somehow it's like the spiritual text is closing, of course, because there needs to be a new one that comes along. So if you're a Cancer rising, I feel like it's something in that realm that is important to take a look at. Okay, let's go ahead now and we'll place Leo on the ascendant. If you're a Leo rising, this eclipse is happening in your 8th house. And of course, the 8th house is related to such things as getting into debt or being entangled with what we share with other people or what we depend on with other people. But of course, it can also have to do with things like inheritance. So the soul, I feel like on the soul level here with this North Node, the soul is wanting to be invested collectively somehow with others, right? We're talking about Pisces, a sign that is very, watery and collective. There's like a union that Pisces tends to um, have us yearning for. So the soul is yearning for some kind of union, and it may have to do with what others can provide for us or have provided for us, or the ways in which we work together or somehow are invested or rely or have joint ventures or businesses with each other. It can even be like the job that you work for, the company that you work for, and your role in that company, and how there's kind of a sharing of what you do for the company. But in the broad strokes, it's like the soul is yearning to be invested collectively with other people around you, right? And um, it might be that you face circumstances closing out like a tab, right? Like almost like when you go to a bar, right? And you say, put it on my tab. And it's almost like the lunar eclipse part of this equation is saying, yeah, you still want to be at the bar and be hanging out with everybody and just putting drinks on your tab. But the barkeeper says, you got to, I'm closing out the tab kind of a thing, which can be definitely unnerving if you're not ready for that and you're not prepared for that, right? Um, so facing circumstances that are closing out the tabs or the unions that we may be entangled with at this time. Now, since lunar eclipses can signify things connected to family and mothers, it may be that you're dealing with those issues as it pertains to inheritance, death, or dependencies. But this is sort of the area that I would look to if you are a Leo rising, in terms of how you are sort of collectively or in a union with other people, if it pertains to what they provide or what you provide, the sort of joint resources and ventures that are a part of your life. Where are the fault lines sort of maybe changing dynamically in those areas is what I would look for if you're a Leo rising. Okay, if you are a Virgo rising, we'll go ahead and put Virgo on the ascendant now. And if you're a Virgo rising, this eclipse is happening in your 7th house. Um, so I think the soul is yearning for this ideal partnership, but will most likely encounter the culmination or ending of current ones as it chases after an ideal picture of union with others, of course. So we talking about Pisces, right? This sign that is Jupiter ruled, that is has this sort of ideal yearning to be um, in a union or to bring union or cohesion around something. So it feels like what the North Node and the soul is saying is that I have this image in my mind about what the ideal partnership would look like, whether that's in business, whether that's in relationship, whatever kind of unions you have with others. It feels like the 7th house is, so with the North Node there, is coming in and saying, um, there's a striving towards this image that has this ideal, quality to it. Um, but what happens though is as we're sort of striving in that direction, it's like circumstances around us um, close out particular unions that we're already in, or um, or relationships with people that we have maybe coming to an end. Um, there may be a way in which the union is a kind of culminative perfect ideal. And it may be that this eclipse is about Don't look other places because you've actually found the perfect ideal and you're already in it. You know what I mean? Like the culmination of a relationship. What is that like? That's like, you hear these stories around people being together for decades, and you sort of they're like examples, right, of people that can make it. Maybe you're in such a union already, and this eclipse is sort of giving you the reflection that um, the grass may not be greener on the other side. You already have the thing that is idealized, but it's about remembering that or coming back to that in some way and seeing how there's like this culmination around what can be had in its ideal form that may be right in front of you or something like that. So I feel like this could be um, a little bit of that, or it could be that in trying to track down and chase and strive for perfect union, certain partnerships, are going to be left behind or something like that. So for Virgo rising, it's very much about the partnerships and union aspects or dynamic of life, I would say. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll put Libra on the ascendant. If you are a Libra rising, this eclipse is falling into your sixth house. This was a really fascinating one for me to reflect on. For Libra rising, the soul seems like it's striving a kind of hard won redemption through conflict, toil, confronting one's obstacles here in the sixth house. The sixth house was said to be the place of like obstacles and misfortune, of toil, of hard work, of trying to get something done that you just have to keep working on over and over, like toil that just never ends. Um, the sixth house was associated with things like slavery and also being an apprentice for like in like a trade or something like that. So I feel like the soul is delving and striving into this realm that is difficult. It's hard. It's about hard work. It's about obstacles and toil and conflict and things that are perceived as, low or sort of misfortunate or something like that, which of course could relate to all kinds of things. It could be something related to the body, something related to the family, the home, your background, family karma, or anything like that, right? It could be whether it's like sort of trying to pull out of like a perceived poverty or a relational conflict with somebody you're in partnership with, or disease in the body, or family karma, emotional sort of psychological work and turmoil. It could be anything, but this one phrase sticks out with me for the sixth house. This keyword is low birth. The sixth house was a place associated with low birth. Um, and so it feels like the soul is moving into a space where it's going to become an apprentice. It's going to till the rocky soil of difficult things. And it's going to show up every day and clock in and do that over the next couple of years. Now, as the soul is sort of doing that, um, it will be a time work is completed or we face dead ends and have to change where we fight for redemption. So if we're looking for a kind of holistic union around the things that are difficult, we're going to hit dead ends. We're going to be throwing our efforts as hard as we can into one particular thing. And sometimes we just have to realize that it's just you can throw everything you got at it and it's just futile on some level. And that's helpful because then it can heel turn you towards applying that energy towards something that is fruitful, right? So those are lessons that are difficult, but oftentimes really helpful in uh, helping us understand where we can change misfortune and where we can't, So I feel like for a Libra rising, it's something like that. Now, of course, tangible things, it could be about your work or projects that you're on that it require a lot of hard work, or again, like working on health or relationships or something like that. But On the soul level, it feels as though the soul is really being adventurous here. It's really saying, I'm going to confront um, the um, I'm going to confront things that feel like hard obstacles that need to be dealt with. And either I'm going to throw everything I got at them and see what can be overcome, what can be completed, or I'm going to see what can't and then move to something else or something like that. So if you're a Libra rising, I feel like it's sort of working in this space that is important that the eclipse is representing for you over the next couple of years. Okay, let's go ahead now and we will put my own rising sign Scorpio on the ascendant here. Um, if you're a Scorpio rising, this eclipse is falling in your fifth house, a place that is connected with some really interesting things. First of all, we have the fifth house being connected with things like joy, fun, recreation, recreation, I think is also interesting. Circumstances around you may bring things to a culminating period for these things or the ending of certain ones. So you think about ways in which maybe you've historically yearned for fun, joy, recreation. Sort of what's the ways that you've enjoyed your life, or like what characterizes the certain joy that you get out of life in terms of, I don't know, sports, hobbies, entertainment, fun, relationships, romance, creativity, passions, like all those things of the fifth house, including children, like the passions of being a parent or a child. It feels as though there's either circumstances are sort of closing down and saying, this is no longer going to be enjoyable anymore. You still need to explore. That North Node is saying you got to explore what makes you happy and what brings you joy. But I don't know if it's what has brought you joy in the past, potentially. It could be something like that. Or it could be that you've reached some kind of pinnacle or mountaintop as it pertains to something like being a parent or having children or something like that. Maybe children are growing up and you're seeing how they're becoming mature or something like that. I know for me personally, this is how so far I've interpreted this eclipse in my fifth house as a Scorpio rising, has been that I have my oldest boy who is 9. I have uh, my second who's, what is she, 17 months old, and she's just absolutely amazing and brilliant. And Kate is pregnant with my third. So we, of course, really enjoy our children. It's a big part of the enjoyment that we both have in life, and me personally. And ever since I was young, I remember feeling like I really wanted to be a father. I really wanted to have children. It wasn't one of those things where I wasn't sure. I was always like, I see that for myself as something that would make me feel complete somehow, or that's like what I'm supposed to do or something. But for me, 3 is kind of enough. And boy, getting to a place where you can actually achieve parenthood it's really not easy, especially today. It seems to get harder and harder. So it takes a lot of things. It takes, like, where do you even begin? When you're in grade school, it's like get good grades so you can get into a good university. Then it's get a good education so you can get a good job. Then it's get a good job so you can support a family. Then it's, get the things for the family, have the home, insurance. It's just like endless, right? Takes a lot of money, takes a whole life to basically have a successful family with children. So for me, this third child is coming around, it's coming right before, not right before, but a little before my third child is born. And I feel like that's it. I've done it. I've reached the pinnacle. I don't need to have any more. I don't need to sort of keep heading in that same direction. So somehow or another, that energy of the fifth house, it has to shift or change. There's dynamic change that is coming through. So I'm still going to create and recreate, um, and find joy and fun, but it'll be somehow different. Maybe it'll just be experiencing parenthood with all three children, and it feels like a different chapter or something like that. Who knows? But definitely it's in that realm of life for me personally. So hopefully that makes sense if you are Scorpio rising. Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to put Sagittarius on the ascendant. If you are a Sagittarius rising, this is going to place the eclipse into the fourth house. Now, this is a really important angular place to have a lunar eclipse and have two more over the next 2 years here. So, fourth house, of course, related to home, family, um, even things like heritage or things like that. It feels like what's happening on a soul level for me is that the soul is striving and yearning to find home and a feeling of foundation. The place below our feet is not just the world that supports us, meaning where we live, like a home or a family. It is those things, but it's also this inner sense of what gives us a place to stand on foundationally, whether that's emotionally, whether that's how we belong to a family or understand our heritage or anything like that, right? Where we come from in our line as it pertains to family karma. All of those things can be fourth home. It can even be the sort of mysteries of the past, um, the mysteries of our ancestors or something like that. So the soul seems to be heading in that north node direction and saying, and yearning to find home. But what does that look like? What does the feeling of foundation look like? Now, as we seek this place, this home, the doors of certain residences surely are going to be closing down around us, probably beyond our control. And it's like we're knocking on doors that just aren't open, right? So um, that isn't a bad thing because the journey to find home isn't going to take you into a home that isn't right. And you don't want to be there if it is. And sometimes that's part of the journey. Where do you belong is where you've been on some level, the places that you've lived in, and what feels right because of what felt wrong or something like that. So definitely it feels like a fundamental journey to find home, maybe in the world, but also spiritually in terms of what gives a sense of personal inner support is what is sort of the soul is striving to bring a kind of redemption for itself, trying to find the ideal home that makes everything better, that redeems it and brings everything in the family together. But where is that and what does that look like? And there's going to be some doors that close that say, this isn't it. Keep looking is where I see. Okay. So if you're Sagittarius rising, it's the eclipse is sending waves through that very foundational place. Okay. Let's move now and place Capricorn on the ascendant. If you're a Capricorn rising, the eclipse is falling into the third house. And an eclipse in the third house is going to suggest that the soul seeks union with the culture around us in some way and the things coalescing around the home, right? The third house is sort of neighboring the fourth house, the place of home. And so it relates to everything from our neighborhood to our relatives to childhood friends. The third house is very much around this sort of circumstantial environment. And a lot of times that also includes the domain of our inner habits or mental sphere, if you will. So certain rituals and family patterns go through a period of deep transformative change that gives us a different landscape to see on the other side. The third house is always a little bit difficult to describe for people, but having an eclipse here is suggesting that there's going to be an exploration into the environment around you, whether that is into the specific and unique culture that you're in right now, or whether that's the culture of your childhood, or whether that's through getting deeper involved in the community around you in some way, or re- like reflecting on childhood matters, friends, relatives. There's this space around this intimate and private place that we all belong to that has to do with a little bit of a wider reach than just where our house is and our family is. It has to do with this environment around us and the environment in our mental spheres in terms of habits and rituals and patterns that we do every day. Somehow the soul is yearning to find a kind of redemptive, ideal place for all of these things to be happening in. But with the lunar eclipse saying circumstances are going to be changing and closing doors in this environment somewhere, the rituals, the patterns, the people, the everyday things that go on, um, or the people that you've been connected to from childhood or something like that is going through transformative change. And I suspect that at the end of this 2-year eclipse period in this house, it's something like 2 years down the road. All of a sudden, it's as if you're swimming in a completely different environment, like you've moved to another neighborhood, so to speak, whether that's a mental neighborhood or whether that's a way that you like, even if you don't physically move to another neighborhood, you somehow understand and perceive and experience the things around you or the culture around you in some kind of different way. I'll give you an example. When I was during a very transformative period of my life where I was leaving my first marriage, um, and there was a lot of chaos thrown into my life that was involved with the marriage dissolving and everything that was tumultuous at that time. That propelled me into a very third housey domain of transformation because I began to learn things that I never learned about before. And it was very much connected with culture, because culture was connected with relationship, and it was and this isn't, by the way, common for people nowadays almost, but relationships are very connected to our culture in some way because there are um, there are role definitions, I guess you could say, right? There are role definitions for who does what, and especially in marriage or something like that. And I had grown up without ever exploring any of the deeper subtleties of cultural narratives around me. And when my life got thrown into this chaos, I took I don't know, like a 2 or 3 year deep dive. And all of a sudden, I started listening to a lot different content online. I got involved with different communities online, and I learned so much about the culture around me, about everything. And it had it had the effect of I came out the other side seeing the world around me and living in my head in just a completely different environment. Like I'm just in a different, I was in the ocean and now I'm in the forest. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like that with Capricorn rising. So it's a really interesting place to have an eclipse, or eclipses coming through over the next couple of years that's sort of changed that everyday kind of perspective on where you are or something like that. Okay, hopefully that makes sense and gives you enough symbolic imagery to sort of see, where things are shifting. Let's go ahead and take a look at Aquarius rising. If you're an Aquarius rising, we are moving this eclipse into the second house, or the eclipse is taking place. The series of eclipses for Aquarius rising is happening over the next 2 years in this second house location. And that is a very, very unique place because Pisces tends to be about how do we bring things cohesively together. So when I think about the keywords of like the second house and how that's always related to what we have or what we possess, or the money in the bank, or the investments that we have, or the savings, or that second house is like our personal garden. We put things into the soil, we let the soil grow and come to us, and then we eat the fruits of the soil. That's the second house. So if you're an Aquarius rising, Pisces hanging out over this environment is like um, this ideal union of things that could somehow make everything good, right? It's like it makes it feel like, if I'm an Aquarius rising, if I can check off all of the things ideally that make me feel like I have what I need, then life is grand, or something like that. So um North Node eclipse definitely feels like there's energy being pumped into sort of figuring out what that is, what kind of tangible or valuable things provide a sense of sustenance and support, or I feel like I have what I need, kind of a thing, over the next couple of years. But it's like, um, we put all our eggs into one basket, but the stocks are reaching their high point. It's like we dump everything into a certain stock, and we're feeling like that's going to make it all happen. But guess what? The stock is culminating. It's reaching a closing door. It's reaching a high point. So, as like a metaphor, yeah, I would definitely be really careful around um, the the sort of romantic desire around like winning it big, like I don't know, like investing in some kind of weird cryptocurrency, and just feeling like that's gonna make everything okay. And somehow you're gonna, the stock's gonna go up, you're gonna make money, you're gonna have what you need, or something like that. It doesn't have to be like a stock thing, but with the lunar symbolism here, it feels like the door is shutting on a kind of investment, or you need to disinvest, or certain holdings won't hold, or there's a diminishment of working or savings, or something like that. So um, it doesn't mean that that's bad necessarily. It just means that this could be a learning experience for how does the soul feel like it has what it needs on a soul level, which is about the tangible things that we do need. Um, but uh, like, how do we know what to invest in um, if we don't learn through experience? And sometimes the experience is going to say, yeah, this one's going to go up and down, and maybe that's not great. Or this door is closing over here. Maybe shift the assets this way or that way. So it's like there needs to be a process of like shifting uh, money, assets, resources around in a certain way in order to sort of understand and feel okay about what it is that we have. So I feel like an Aquarius rising eclipse in the second house is suggesting something around those deeper kind of security things. Okay. So if you are a Pisces rising, this eclipse is falling into the first house, of course, and this is a pretty existential place to have eclipses coming through for the next 3 years. Now, what I feel like for this one is that it feels like a time where there's kind of a yearning and an effort that we sort of pour into ourselves on some level. If you're a Pisces rising, you're sort of pouring effort, striving towards something about yourself, whether that's an identity, whether that's what you do in the world, as you identify with what you do in the world, whatever it is about yourself, fundamentally about the body, about your character, your personality, your identity, anything that is really fundamentally about you. It feels like the North Node is suggesting that the eclipses you're pouring something into yourself. But it could be that as you've been pouring a certain something in that direction, it's gotten all the juice that it can yield. And maybe this is a time where you no longer identify or feel the need to pour into yourself that same way. So, and this could especially pertain to something of the past, especially as it relates to like family identity or karma. You know, like the older I get, I always feel like I become more and more like my parents, both in different ways, kind of. But you know, when you're younger, you just feel like, I don't know. I guess maybe it's different for everybody. But when I was younger, I felt like I was just me, and the older I get, I feel like somehow I'm I'm moving closer and closer to who like my parents were. I don't know if that's common for everybody, but I know that that's sort of been how I felt. And especially with this lunar symbolism, having this lunar eclipse in the first house, could it relate to, you know, how you feel like you're like your mom or people in your family, or, you know, how you feel like you're sort of identified with family karma or something like that? It could have something to do with that, and going through a process where there's maybe dynamic identification that is shifting or changing around that perspective somehow. And it there still is a need to sort of pour into yourself, but it could be that that looks, um, you need to change what you're pouring or something like that. It looks different somehow, or you need to pour something new into yourself or something like that. And again, especially as it may relate to anything of the family, the mother, the past, family identity or karma or something like that. So, of course, tangible interpretations are going to be, you know, things that are happening with the body, health, things like that. Sometimes lunar eclipses in the first house can bring about health challenges and need to sort of figure out how to, you know, overcome a health challenge or something like that. But it can also pertain to identity and especially soul identity with the North Node. There is like the need to really pour something in to you personally. So this is one of those ones where it may be challenging for other people at times to understand why it is that you need to focus on something about yourself right now. And so that can come with its own challenges too. But I feel like definitely that's what the soul is exploring. And there may be the need to pay attention. Well, there should be the need to pay attention to that, as it were. So even if that comes with sort of a little bit of tension or conflict around us, because we need to devote that time, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And oftentimes we can feel really guilty about that. But that's what the soul seems to be speaking towards with this eclipse cycle. And so I'd be really interested if that had anything to do with things like the mother or family identity or things like that. So if you're Pisces rising, I would look to the changing dynamic waves that are coming through in terms of who you are, what you are, how you identify the body. All of those kinds of things are seemingly where this eclipse is pointing to that particular area of life if you are Pisces rising. Okay, well, that is all of the horoscopes. We've made it through. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope you guys got some good imagery out of this that will point you in the right direction to think about the circumstances that you know that I don't know, that'll make those symbols click and go, okay, I see how these domains are sort of coming up with this eclipse cycle over the next couple of years. I'd love to hear any stories or ideas that you guys have in the comments. That would be great. And I'll be back again with another Mantic Monday video next week. Until then, stay safe and take care. Bye for now.